Let's have a word of prayer. Lord God, thank you so much for giving us this time together, and bless us as we continue to look at different faith systems. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. We're looking at...
Wait a minute, there was nothing in there about joy. And I know you didn't pray for the Steelers.
There's no prayer for the Steelers right now.
No, there isn't. You didn't have one Sunday.
There's no prayer for the
They get a
Steelers.
better coaching system.
Yes. Well, all right. Let's focus our attention on Judaism.
It's going to be hard. When
Tell me about it.
You mean it's the end of the world?
I'm sorry I disrupted things.
What's that?
I'm sorry I disrupted.
Well, no, Joy.
20 minutes late?
This has been one of the few things that have really given me a lot of joy lately. Is this possibility
of a marriage?
Marriage.
Yeah,
They're already married.
And the good news, John. The good news, and I'm glad you mentioned marriage. In the Presbyterian Church, I can now officiate your wedding.
I know.
Yeah, I can now do it.
Oh, okay.
All right. Now you are at a dinner. And
Oh my God.
with a friend. So I want you to imagine you got a friend, and you're having dinner, and he or she, depending on the gender of your friend, points at a person over there and says, "He's a real Jew.
I don't like that.
He's a real Jew."
That's offensive.
Now that's really kind of interesting. What do you think he means or she means by the comment? He's a real Jew.
Well, he'd have the curls.
Okay, so you would looking at him, at the guy that's being pointed at. Okay. What else? What do you think? You're sitting there with your friend. He's a real Jew. What do you think he said? Now you said, Art, I find that offensive.
I do.
What comes to mind when he says he's a real Jew?
It's because, actually, he's criticizing them.
Okay, good. How would you, as you hear that? Because I'm not sure I wouldn't join. If he says that, I'd go, whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. How is he criticizing?
Well, would the person take that as a criticism? Because that's
Well,
who he is. That's not a Jew is not a. To me, it's not a inflammatory thing. That's his belief system.
Okay, well, now you're kind of going cringy. Now remember, we're just at a dinner.
Yeah.
Your friend points at somebody across the room. He's a real Jew. So it's not what is your friend? What do you think? What's your first assumption that your friend is suggesting? You're kind of offended by it. You cringed a little bit. What do you think he's suggesting? What is your friend suggesting?
To me, being Zoltan now,
Why did someone
I
have
would just think that he was referring to his beliefs.
Okay, so he was looking across the room and saying, that person has Jewish belief system.
He doesn't even know.
Okay, that's a possibility. What else? Now, that's not the way you're hearing it when your friend says it. That's not, you're not saying, oh, what an interesting set of beliefs over there.
Well, you might want to hear his tone before you make a judgment.
Okay, what difference would that make?
Well, if he says, oh, he's a real Jew, then that's sort of like...
Well, like you can't... You can't
Okay, so if he says, well, he's a real Jew, you're thinking hard to deal with?
That's what it comes
Okay.
to.
I'm not thinking that. That's what that person...
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I want you to do.
Yeah.
I want you to get into his head. Not what you're thinking, but what he's thinking when he says it.
Yeah.
You know, that he's pointing at somebody that is hard to get along with. He's pointing at somebody who is
tight.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, there's somebody who's tight.
Yeah.
You know,
What you
tight
need is
with
a
money.
chip. It's going to be like 5%.
Okay, tight or good.
I would think the guy that's saying that's racist.
Okay, you start thinking the guy who's saying it has racial issues, or issues with ethnic things. He would also.
I'd say he's a racist.
Yeah, okay. Would say an Irishman, you know, is
I mean, that's something Hitler would say.
Okay.
That's something Hitler would say.
Okay, so that's what. Now, of course, did we grow up with that?
Hitler?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, good gracious.
I did.
No.
You know,
I didn't. But I didn't.
okay, you didn't. I mean, when I was growing up, you know, the word Jew was not just used as a noun.
No.
It was a verb, right?
Yeah.
Jew was a verb.
But
You know, he Jewed him down. You know, and I mean, when people said that, they weren't thinking, "Ooh, I'm ethnically." That was just something that people said. I mean, that's just what they said. You know, and you don't even realize that it may be ethnically offensive if you're not with a lot of Jews that say, "I am offended by it." So, but it could be now if your friend's a Jew and he says that guy's a real Jew, it may be. You know, could be a complimentary thing or an identification thing, or I've seen him at the synagogue. Okay, but we've got preconceptions about what the word means, right? Certain things come to mind, just as we did last week, not last year. It only seems like a year. When we talked about, you know, that she's a real Christian. You know, that some people heard that she's straight-laced, narrow, probably going to condemn things. Other people, you know, she's, you know, has a lot of joy and smiles. You know, so we have preconceptions about these words. Now, when we talk about Judaism, and I'm going to trip over that, which will be entertaining, there are a lot of preconceptions, a lot of ways to see Judaism, like this wonderful little cartoon, which points to Judaism as, and the same thing there as here. I could see it up there. Complimentary?
not at all.
No, I'm not thinking that's a real good complimentary thing.
Squinty hands like he's it's so tight and he's ugly.
Hook nose, bad teeth.
Yeah. He doesn't spend the money on himself.
Okay.
Come on.
All right. For some, that's real Jew.
He does kind of have spiky hair.
Yeah, kind of has spiky hair.
It's more kinky, I think.
Real Jew, right? That's what comes to mind.
Yeah.
Well, now that doesn't. I would still not define them as real Jews.
Why not?
Why would I?
Why wouldn't
I have
you?
to classify anyone?
Well,
That's a religion.
But that's he's Jewish. They're Jewish. That's a word. Not
Okay.
Jew.
but a Jew wouldn't be offensive if you said, a Jew would say, I'm a Jew.
Yeah.
Just like you would say, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Muslim. You know, if somebody says, you know, on the telephone says, oh, by the way, I'm Jewish, would you expect them to be somebody that looks like that? Could be. I wouldn't. You know, I wouldn't. Why? Because they're. And I don't assume that there are a lot of black Jews running around, but there are in Ethiopia. You know, there are Jews in Ethiopia.
They're allowed to move. They can
Yeah, well, that's,
Boy, you're awful today. That's heartwarming.
Yes, that's heartwarming. Yes. That would, if these folks were walking down downtown Weirton, you wouldn't pay attention at all.
Not really.
Just a group of folks walking downtown.
No, because it's out of character in Weirton.
It's out of character in Weirton, right? Okay. So that would attract a little attention.
If you were downtown New York, it wouldn't be.
Like a cake box.
If you lived in New York, that wouldn't even be.
What's on the first head?
It's a hat.
Little boys.
It looks like a round cake box.
Well, it is empty.
Yeah,
Well, that's
It looks like a hat box.
like a hat box.
Now,
Okay.
If you were in New York or if you were in Squirrel Hills in Pittsburgh, that probably would be a common everyday thing.
If I were in Pittsburgh and saw that, I probably would look. Would you look? If I saw a group walking down Pittsburgh, would you look? I'd look.
Look.
Yeah, I'd look. That would catch my.
Don't say
eye.
there's a bunch of Jews walking down the street.
Yeah, or I would try not to look, which is the same thing. You know, but they would get my attention. And of course,
Seinfeld.
Jerry Seinfeld. All of them represent
Jews.
what it means to be a
Jew.
Jew, or at least in terms of mindset. You know, very few Jews would say, yes, this is going to be on my bar mitzvah picture because that's my uncle, Saul. They would, this is a French.
Straight out of Germany.
No, actually it's not. It's French. When you talk about anti-Semitism, or Roman Catholic brothers and sisters refined it in a way that the Germans never did. Okay, so what we're going to talk about what Judaism though is all about.
Now, if you're talking about being offended by this, if you watched any of Jerry Seinfeld's shows, they talked about.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, he talked about being Jewish all the time.
Oh, absolutely. You listen to.
It was.
Well, if you listen to any of the comedians, the Catskill comedians, most of their act is grounded on being Jewish. So they certainly didn't see it as, and with all the stereotypes involved. Okay, when we look, as we have done with other things, we're going to look at the history. We're going to look at basic beliefs. We're going to look at rituals. We're going to look at the relationship between Judaism and other religions. Okay, and so when we talk a little bit about history, and if we go sort of around the bend, and starting with ancient history, what pictures do we have up here?
We got Moses.
Moses with the Bible.
Okay, we got Moses. We've got Moses in the Bible here, right? Okay, so we got well, not Bible. What has Moses got in his hand?
Commandments.
Okay, 10 Commandments. Yeah, Anybody see the History of the World, Part 2?
It's comedy.
Oh yeah, History of the World, Part 2. When Moses comes down with the 15 commandments and breaks one tablet and says, God has given me 10 commandments. This is Moses with the 10 commandments, the law over here. Do y'all have an idea what's going on here? This is a good, of course, Roman mosaic, important part in Jewish history. What's going on in that picture?
Maybe baptism.
Yeah, it looks like something's being baptized, right? But we're talking about Jews, important part of Jewish history.
The one in black, especially, he's praying over him.
Yeah, this one, something's happening to it, right?
Yeah.
What's happening to it? This guy is doing what?
Something over his head.
It's pouring something on his head. Very good. What's happening here?
That's a king being anointed.
A king being anointed. Greatest king?
David.
This is a mosaic of David being anointed. Okay. Any idea what's going on in that picture?
That's Saul?
Not Saul, but Solomon doing what? Dedicating the temple. Okay, and a little map of Israel when the tribes enter the land. Okay, now where do we find the history of the ancient Israelites? Where do we find that history?
In Egypt and
well, we find some of it in Egyptian writings.
And in
some.
Judea.
You mean in America?
Well, where do we find out the history? How do we know anything about what happened with the ancient Jews?
That's
because
in the Bible.
Okay, you got the Old Testament.
Old Testament.
The biblical witness. And the biblical witness goes back to what?
The beginning.
Okay, goes back to the beginning, which is is more of a prehistory than a history. I mean,
it's not historical.
It wasn't intended to be historical. It's stories to explain different things that occur. When might we say we can really pick up on? And again, remember, history is always, there's no such thing as objective history. Objective history doesn't exist. Why does objective history not exist?
Because it's always in the eyes of the person who wrote it.
Somebody is writing it, right? And if I choose one verb versus another, I'm shaping the story, right?
Yes.
There's a wonderful song in the Broadway show Wicked, where the wizard is talking about, that life society is built on lies. One person is called I lost the word. No, not a philanthropist. And another is called, the same person is called a tyrant. But it's the same person. What's the difference?
Who's looking at it?
It's the viewpoint of the one who's writing it down. Right. Somebody's a great leader. Good gracious. He is the greatest leader we've ever had. He is what? The worst leader we've ever had. talking about the same person?
Yeah.
Yeah. One right and one wrong?
Yes.
Both of them basing it on the same facts.
Well, don't we have that freedom in America? No.
We have this freedom. Everybody has always had that freedom.
Not
You know,
every-
how the writer shapes the story, shapes the history. So we need to be aware. So if history is going to, we got this prehistory, this sort of ancient history with all kinds of stories and where would you say, even in the Bible, that more verifiable from different sources?
When the Israelites came out.
Okay, so maybe with the Exodus, when the Israelites coming out of Egypt, now we could start getting into something that's a little more solid. Why might we look at that and say, oh yeah, that's a little...
Because the stories are more believable.
Okay, the stories are more realistic. What else might you look for? If somebody else is writing it, you know.
When they left Israel.
Collaboration, somebody else.
Yeah, there's some verification. You know, there's somebody else is writing about the Israelites leaving. One person is writing about Abraham, you know, dealing with Sarah and angels and all kinds of stuff. You got one person writing, that's fine. But if you've got something about a movement of people, and you've got Egyptian writers writing about it, and Jewish writers writing about it, even though their perception is different, at least you've got it. Verified. Corroborated. So I could get corroborated. I couldn't get philanthropist. Okay, yeah. Okay, so we got the law, and who is going to be central around the law and the Exodus? What individual? Okay, Moses becomes this figure that becomes central in the giving of the law. Now, how might the giving of the law? Why might the giving of the law, or the reception? Maybe not giving, but the reception. Why would that be so crucial as Judaism starts to develop?
Because that's the basis of their beliefs. That's what they believe in. That's what
Moses was Jewish.
Okay, that's what they believe in. Now, what is the assumption when you look at the Jews receiving the law? And by the way, what is the law about? What's some of the stuff in the law?
Commandments.
Okay, you got a lot of commandments, right? And what are some of the commandments in there? Don't kill. Honor your father and mother.
Commit adultery.
Yeah, don't commit adultery.
Don't steal. No stealing.
What's that?
I think that's a bad one.
That's a bad one.
No stealing.
No stealing.
Coveting.
That's right.
Coveting others.
honor.
Yes. Show up for dinner if you've got an opportunity. Wait. You have given me. It's very interesting. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't commit adultery. Honor your father and mother. Don't lie.
Don't covet.
Don't covet, and covet is desiring. Okay?
Remember the Sabbath.
Oh, now this is the first time we've got something that sounds what?
Right.
Religious!
Oh.
Everything else you gave was, you know, like if you went to Israel, don't kill. But you know the Egyptians allowed people to kill one another all the time, right?
Now?
No.
No.
You know, no society can
That's
survive
basic
if you're killing one another. You know, it kind of cuts it down. Or if everybody is worried about people stealing or lying or committing adultery or doing nasty things to their parents, societies don't exist very well, right? They die out. Or they fall apart. And, you know, people
They scatter.
Yeah, they scatter around. But so a lot of the law, in fact, if you look at them, 6 of the commandments really don't involve
God.
God. Doesn't involve religion. You know, I don't have to believe in God to believe it's wrong to kill. You mentioned honor, you know, keeping the Sabbath, you know, no idolatry, there's one God. You know, now we're into religious stuff, right? Worship stuff. But you've got 6 of them that have nothing to do with God blatantly, right? And yet, what did the Jews do by having those commandments? Because Moses could have come down with a set of religious commandments. You know, honor me, don't use my name in vain, honor the Sabbath. You know, he could have come down with these religious, and then the people develop other laws for their society. What did the Jews do by having Moses bring down those 10 commandments? Which have 6 of them that deal with how people live with one another.
Well, they codified.
Okay, they're codifying it. Yes, they're putting it down. What else are they doing by having Moses be the...
Relating Judaism to God.
Yes. All of a sudden you've got civic law related to God.
Yes.
So it's not just that we think it's a bad idea to kill one another. And if you kill one another, you're going to get killed too. But all of a sudden, that's not Ed Rudiger, the king, or this group as a society. This is a command from God. And when God says it, you do what?
You better follow
You
it.
better follow it. If I say it, you may do it until I'm gone, and then you revisit it. But
We might overtake you too.
yeah, that's more like it. All right, so you've got this law, this codification. The Jewish people are centered around this law that's both religious, because Leviticus is full of religious law, but then you've got Numbers in Deuteronomy that's full of civic law. You know, what do you do when your ox falls into a ditch? You know,
Walk on.
what do you do?
Buy another one.
Well, no, you can take the ox out.
Yeah.
If your wife falls into a ditch, though,
Or you got to
Leave
save
her
it.
there, huh?
no, you don't. You can leave her there because that's work. You know, it's work to take your wife out of the ditch on the Sabbath, but not your ox, which tells me
That's
that
nuts.
in ancient Israel,
Ox is more important.
Then a
no,
wife.
there were some huge women. Huge women. All right, so we got Moses as an important figure. What else, as we talk about the development of the Jews historically, who else would be an important figure? David. Why would David be such an important figure? If Moses, as the lawgiver, communicates, God talks to Moses, Moses talks to the people, bang, that's the law that we follow from God. Why does David become such an important figure as the Jews are sort of becoming a people?
Because he was anointed by God.
Okay, he's
Ordained
what is David?
King.
He's a king, right? Now, to have a king means
Yes, that will fall.
He's in control.
you got to follow, you got to control of what?
His people.
People. And that people, if you've got a king, you've got the people have become what?
Civilized.
Have become civilized, have become
Codified in the law.
His
And
country.
they,
a country. Become a country, right? You know, you don't have a king if you don't have a country, right? You need a country. So as David, and again, how does David become king? Well, his armies were stronger than everybody else's, and he took power and became king, right? He defeated the other tribes and therefore was able to establish his domination over this people, right? That's how it happened, right? In the biblical story.
No.
No! How does David become king?
He was anointed by him as a child.
He was anointed by Samuel,
By
right? Samuel anoints him. Why does Samuel anoint David?
I have no idea.
Good
Because
question
of
that,
all-
Art. I didn't realize it was such a good question.
because
Why?
of his genealogy, because of his
Was it
law.
because of his genealogy?
I mean,
Saul was already king.
right?
Yeah, Saul was already king.
Right.
Why then, if David is going to be this figure that's going to become the first legitimate leader of a nation, and we don't know what kind of nation this was, or country this
So
was.
far, you know.
We don't know. Well, I mean, by the writings, we don't know. You know, objectively, what this looks like. We know what the biblical witness says, but we don't know what is written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later. You know, so we don't know what on the ground it looks like. We know how they describe it. That with David, you all of a sudden have a country that has a unified army. His son is going to have a taxing system. You know, that they're building things, and you've got to have an organization to build things.
Where was this done?
You know.
In Egypt?
Okay, well, what I'm asking is, what I just said, David had the strongest army, right? And you said no. How does David become? You said anointed by Solomon, by Samuel. Why does Samuel anoint David king?
Because they wanted a leader.
Because
They just chose.
Well, now that's an interesting thing because that's how Saul ends up being king, because people want a king.
Right.
But how does David become king?
Isn't it through the
Oil?
lineage of
No,
Bethlehem?
has nothing to do with land. Nothing to do with
Oil.
land. Oh, practically yes. But why was the oil poured on David? Why did Samuel? Because Rick is right. There's already a king. Saul is still king.
Yeah.
Kings don't like two kings. They get very nervous when a second king shows up. You know, why does Samuel anoint
Did he
David.
have a dream and an angel came to him?
Doesn't have a dream and an angel, but we do have what? Divine revelation, right? Why does David become king?
Because God.
Because God wanted David to be king, right?
Yeah.
Why does Moses get the law? Because God wanted Moses to give the people the law. So what the Jews have done as they're recording this history is, why do we have this law? It's not because people got together and came up with good ideas and work. It is
We were getting.
they brought God into something.
Mankind
God
was
gave.
getting. They needed laws because mankind was doing worse and worse and worse.
That's right. But who saw that? God saw it. And God intervened. Why do they have a king? Because God intervened and God did it. It would be like saying that, why do we have a constitution? God did it. Not a lot of smart people got in a room and figured out how to organize a government when you had 13 governments before. God intervened and whispered in the ear of James Madison. And boom, we got a constitution. That's what they're saying. Okay? So they're anchoring the society that's going to develop into God. And even interpreting the history in light of God. Because why does Solomon build a temple?
To praise God, to honor God, to worship.
Well, true, but even stronger than that. Why do you think Solomon builds a temple?
He had enough money to do it.
Both of you may be historically true. I think, have no question, you are both historically true. But that's not what they write. They don't write because Solomon was rich, he decided to build a temple. Didn't say Solomon was rich or wanted to worship God, therefore he built a temple. Why did Solomon build a temple?
Because David couldn't build it.
David couldn't, but who said?
God said.
God said.
Yeah, David
Solomon
had blood
could.
on his hands, and only Solomon had his son could do it.
Exactly. So why is there a temple? God. Why is there a law? God. Why is there a king? God.
Why is there a map?
Why is there a map? That's excellent, Art. Why is this divided into tribal areas?
That's where
God.
God.
Oh, he separated the land.
You better believe it. God gave Joshua, that the line between Ephraim and Manasseh goes from the big rock in the field to the tree of whatever. All of this is God. Okay. So the ancient Israelites, as they look back on their history, are attributing their development to God. Okay, and we see areas that are going to be really important. We're going to see the law as important. We're going to see the king as important. We're going to see the worship as important, particularly worship that is focused on
Would it be important to say
temple.
they're contributing their history to one God?
Absolutely, to their God.
One.
Yeah, which is one. Although, and theologically we might look at it a little bit, it's really important to note, especially when you read the Psalms. In the Psalms, I talk about our God is a God above all gods. Well, when you say our God is above all gods, what are you saying?
You're bragging.
But our God is the ultimate God. So it depends on how you define it. How you're defining it. Okay, so we've got a nation here. Now, if we look at the historical record, not just in the Bible, but it is included in the Bible, but also records from other places that is corroborated by a philanthropist. Okay, we've got. Okay, now as we look, and this is a little painting of the first captivity, the people of Israel being led out not into Egypt. Where were they taken into captivity? Who conquers Israel?
Babylon.
Okay, first Assyria conquers half, and they lead people out. Then the Babylonians, the Assyrians had a philosophy on how to handle conquered people, because they make sure you don't drop that phone, keep that phone tilted up in case something important comes through.
Slaves.
Yeah, I like steak too. Rare. Okay. Now, so we have one of the things the Babylonians, the Assyrians did, which is really.
I guess he's drinking waiting for me.
I see a cat. But he's grown a lot of hair since I saw the last picture. What the Babylonians and the Assyrians did, because conquerors want to maintain their conquered areas as cheaply and as easily as possible. And one of the things you can do, and there are two different philosophies, and one of them is going to be followed by the Babylonians and the Assyrians, the other one is going to be followed by the Persians and the Romans. Diametrically opposed. Both of them work. It's just a different philosophy. What the Babylonians and the Assyrians, they believe that the biggest threat to their empire is for people in the areas that they conquer to rebel.
Yes.
And if I am an Egyptian and Assyria conquers Egypt, and I'm an Egyptian and I am now being ruled by the Assyrians, and I'm living on the Nile, I may get a wild hair and decide to fight for my freedom, right? And I want to liberate my land, because this is my land. When countries, and this is what I found really interesting when we chose to do this in the early part of the century, it kind of caused me to go, oh, that's really interesting. When the Russians were the Germans were invading Russia, what did the Russians what were they fighting for?
Land, country.
But it's not just their country, it's their motherland. When the Germans are marching into Poland, they are fighting for the fatherland. This is their land. That's when we started talking about homeland. We're going to fight for our homeland. That was a huge shift in American philosophy.
Homeland security.
Because we didn't talk in the past about homeland. America was more focused on principles and philosophy and government and freedom, not so much on dirt. Yeah. But all of a sudden, homeland doesn't involve fighting for liberty. Homeland means fighting for not Canada, not Mexico, dirt. United States, dirt. I'm not criticizing because countries have used that forever. The Assyrians said that's dangerous. So when people start talking about fighting for the homeland, that's bad. So how do you get people to stop fighting for the homeland?
Enslave them.
Well, you could enslave them, but if they're still in the homeland,
kill them.
You got a problem.
And those they kill
Where
them.
you go? Well, you can't kill them all. Too many to kill.
Oh.
You take the biggest troublemakers, and they're usually the ones that are the richest and have the power, and you ship them someplace else. You ship them to someplace else in the empire, and then bring those people, they're rich and powerful, to the other place. Because the rich and powerful from this corner of the empire, they're not going to fight for the Jewish homeland. They don't care. And the Jews aren't going to fight for whatever homeland, but they don't care. And so all of a sudden you've broken the possibility of rebellion. Oh, you reduced it. The possibility of rebellion. And that's what happens with the captivity. It happens twice. Once with Israel and Assyria, once with Babylon. They're taken away.
What about another? Didn't Rome? I mean, when Egypt had the Jews there captive.
Okay, the Jews were captive. That was before the Exodus. And then Moses leads them out. So this is much, much later. And so we've got this picture. We've got... anybody recognize him?
No.
Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great's going to do what?
He's going to
Conquer the world. So he's going to conquer the Jewish homeland. Romans, and you see what these are Romans carrying stuff into Rome. Roman soldiers and
I see the Jewish.
Yeah, menorah they're carrying it because the Romans ended up ruling the land, and this is just a Jewish symbol, medieval Jewish symbol. Yeah. Okay, and what's happening, and these are Jews, because you can tell they got little beards on, and they're begging for mercy, and Jesus is up there looking down at the Jews.
Watching
and who are these guys with crowns on their heads?
Probably the Crusaders.
They're Crusaders, and Jesus is looking at the Jews, and they're thinking what? Jesus is thinking what? We got Crusaders, and we got Jews down here begging for mercy. And we got Crusaders with big long swords and Jesus up there. And what is Jesus thinking?
I would think Jesus would be looking at the Crusaders, not the Jews.
What's that?
I would be thinking Jesus would be looking at the Crusaders.
Well,
Not the Jews.
if he's looking down at the Jews, what's he thinking?
Well, maybe they deserve
They're
it.
making
Yeah,
things-
exactly.
They're making
You know, kill a few more. You know, because these Crusaders were doing what?
Kill 'em.
Yeah, fighting for Christianity, okay? So we're going through a period of time when the Jews are... Now, if the Jews are in captivity, what is that suggesting about the Jewish people? They've been a nation, right? Conquered nation. Oh, by the way, I said that the philosophy of the Babylonians and the Assyrians were transformed. Different philosophy with the Persians and the Romans. Because what the Persians and the Romans did, instead of moving people out, is they let people run their own show.
because they had more power,
Well, what
strength.
if they say to the Jews, and we got these books in, like the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah, about the Jews coming back because of the Persian king. You know, if the Jews look at the Persian king and he lets them come home, how do they feel towards the Persian king?
They feel good.
They love him.
Guy, yeah.
You know, they
Loves
love
him.
him. What, am I going to fight against this guy?
Right.
Heck no, he brought me home. So the Persians and the Romans were far more tolerant of, and you can come on, you worship your own God, build your own temple, that's okay. We're cool with that. You pay your taxes, we're fine with it. We're not going to mess with you. The Jews say thank you, right? Until the Jews say,
No more.
no more. And then the Romans tear down the temple. Okay, so we've got, so what is happening through all this? You know, the foreigners ruling the land, captivity, crusade. What's happening to the Jewish people? Are they a nation?
No.
Well, are they a country?
No.
No. Are they a nation? Yes. Because what makes them a nation?
Their religion.
Their religion makes them a nation. What makes them a nation? Their language makes them a nation. What makes them a nation?
Their custom and their law.
Their customs make them a thank you very much, their law. Because right now, do they have a king? No. So that king is gone, right? Do they have a temple? No. Temple worship gone. What do they have left?
Daniel.
What's that?
Daniel.
They have Daniel, and they've got what?
They have custom.
They've got customs that are grounded where? In law. So all of a sudden they have law. So law becomes more and more a focus of Jewish people as the Jewish nation, as that nation becomes spread out. Now, as we go through this captivity business,
Yes.
why do the children of Israel, why are they conquered by the Assyrians and the Babylonians? Why are they
They
conquered?
weren't faithful to God and way, in His ways. They were being unrighteous. They were worshiping other gods. They were having
Jews were
sacrifices.
doing this.
The Jews are, so the Jews, now they're not saying, because we've got they are in an uncomfortable position, this Jewish nation is a really uncomfortable position because they are between two superpowers. Because you've got a superpower that's to the west, and what's the superpower to the west? Always for thousands of years. What's the superpower to the west? Egypt. Egypt. Superpower to the west. Superpower to the east. You have a whole string of it, right? But it's in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, right? And you've got a whole string of it, like Assyria, like Babylon, eventually like Persia. You've got, and the people of Israel are, the Jewish nation is in between. You got a fertile crescent, Jewish nation is in between. Now, when these two powers are on kind of a decline, like they were when Solomon was king, then the Jewish nation becomes really powerful. Because they control what? Trade. As these powers are trading with one another, they got to go through Jewish land. And if these are going through flux, you know, revolutions, changes, and dynasties and stuff, Jewish nation can sort of assert itself. So can Syria, can sort of assert it, Iran, can sort of assert itself. But when one of these superpowers becomes more powerful, now the Jewish nation is what?
Diminished.
In big trouble. because who's going to want to exert its influence? One of the two, either Egypt or whatever, Assyria, Babylon, and so they became caught in this kind of this, vice grip between, these two superpowers. So that's the Jewish.
The fact that they say they fell out of grace with God, it's just their perspective.
Oh yeah, but see, this is what's really important. This is what's important about how they're recording the history. Just like they attributed the law, the civic law, to God. God told us not to kill. It's not because we thought it was a good idea, but God, or Congress passed it. God said don't kill. God said to worship in that temple in Jerusalem. Just so happens to be the capital of the country, but that's where we're supposed to worship. God told us this dynasty should hold the kingship. It should be a Davidic king. God said, not because the Davidic line is stronger or can muster the power or that's not the reason. God. So why do they go in exile? What's the one word? God. Why do they go in exile? God. It's not because they're in a caught between two superpowers. Why do they go in it? God. They disobey God. When they disobey God, what? Bad things happen. In fact, people, other countries are going to, because they all have gods. Other countries have gods. The Egyptians, when they are beating down on the Jews, they're saying, whose God is stronger, yours or mine? Which God is stronger? And the Jews are going to say, the Egyptians are going to say, ours. What's the proof that our God is stronger? Because we're beating up on you. If your God was so strong, he could take care of our gods, right? So who's the big guy now? Well, how did the Jews, when the Jews are conquered by the Babylonians, the book of Ezekiel.
Say we fell out of the grace of God.
Well, Jeremiah is going to say Jews are committing all these horrible sins, disobeying God. And that's why Ezekiel is, far more mystical, his writings. Because he sees visions. He sees the Spirit of God, the kavod, the glory of God, do what? Leave the temple. He sees the Spirit of God, the glory of God, leave the temple. Which means what?
He's gone.
He's gone. So it's not that the gods of Babylon have defeated the God of Israel. Because the God of Israel has done what? Left. He allowed that to happen. So as they're shaping the history, they are still doing what? Attributing this to God. Attributing this to God.
Question.
Sure.
Since 1939, have they changed their viewpoint?
Well,
I think they have.
what we're going to talk. Let's talk about that in a little bit because we're going to get there. Okay, because we're looking at the history. So we've got this period of captivity where the Jews are being spread out, right? The Jewish nation is being spread out. They don't have a king. They don't have a temple.
But they're making babies.
But they're making babies. What is the only thing? They got three things. The Jews had three things. They had king, temple, law. What do they have left? Law. Especially when the Romans tear down the third temple. And it was the third temple built by Herod. When they tear down the third temple in 71, now the Jews aren't allowed to worship at any temple other than the one in Jerusalem. So you can't build a new one someplace else. It's got to be Jerusalem because that's where God wants it. All they have is law, right? And what happens is the law becomes more and more important as a sign for the Jews that they are God's special people. In other words, if you are Roman, you live by Roman law, right? And how does Roman law develop? Well, you have a Senate that passes law. You have an emperor that does edicts. And, Roman law. We're a Jewish community. We follow Jewish law. Where do we get Jewish law? God. From God. So that sets us apart as a special people of God. And so that as the Jews become spread without a country, it becomes more and more focused on their law, which comes from God. Now, if that becomes increasingly their focus, becomes increasingly that focus. What is occurring in these internally in these Jewish communities? What would these Jewish communities be seeking if their identity is grounded in a very elaborate set of laws, not just the Bible, Torah, but an interpretation of the Torah?
They would be closing in, they'd be closing in with each other.
Yeah. Right. You don't want Romans living next door, because Romans, they follow another law. You want your community to be focused on Jewish law. And Jewish law includes, the civic law we talked about. A lot of the worship law, the Levitical law, no longer applies because it has to do with temple worship. But what else is involved in Jewish law? Dietary law. There's certain things Jews can't eat. Why can't they eat? What are some things Jews can't eat?
Well, it's pork.
Can't eat pork.
But why?
Can't eat. Okay.
Do you know why? Because it had poison in it.
Well, why? Okay. If you asked a Jew, why can't you eat pork? What would be the answer? God. Jews can't eat
unkosher food.
Can't eat shellfish. Can't eat lobster. Can't eat oysters.
Get out.
Can't do it.
I didn't know
Now
that.
we can look at that. We can look at it and say, well, that makes complete sense. I mean, in an age before refrigeration, we all know what happens to shellfish. Good gracious, I lived in New Orleans. One of the things, if you ever go to New Orleans and you're looking at a big pile of crawfish, and I'm telling you this is the truth. Big pile of crawfish, there's nothing better on earth than a pile of crawfish. You learn how to pop those tails, and when you suck the head, get that fat and juice out of it. Oh, that's good stuff. But when you're eating it, you want to be real careful.
Yeah.
Because if you run across a crawfish, what crawfish should you never eat? This big pile of crawfish, you should avoid a crawfish that has one. Now,
That's not hard.
well, that's refrigeration too. Has to do with refrigeration too. You never eat a crawfish with a straight tail. If you've got a crawfish and the tail is straight, you never eat that crawfish. Throw it out. Why?
Dead.
It was dead when it was cooked. You gotta boil them alive. And if you boil them alive, when those crawfish in their last moments of life, feeling the intense pain of the boiling water, what will they do to defend themselves? They'll curl their tail as a last desperate attempt to protect themselves, and they would be curled. If they're dead in the water already, they ain't going to curl their tail. And if they're dead before you cook them, you may have a problem, because shellfish go bad by looking at it. They can go bad almost immediately. And so diet makes a lot of sense. You can't send people out and eating oysters that have been sitting in the sun for 4 days. That's stupid. But why can't Jews eat shellfish? God. That's easy. God. Why don't you eat bats? God. Why can't you eat dogs? God. God.
But they fished. That was the...
You can eat fish, but you can't eat shellfish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, because God. So you end up with these insular communities, these little communities. Now, so the Jews, as they're spread, become these little communities that are focused on the law. The only identity they've got is identity through the law. Their language, their customs, their diet, their dress. All of this is going to set them apart, from others. And they're living in different societies, right? Because they're not dominating any societies. In which societies are they living?
All over the world.
They're living all over the world, which would include they're living in societies that are, I'm thinking of religious. What religions are the Jews living under?
Catholic, Catholic.
Okay, they're living under Roman Catholics, And at one point, that's the only show in town if you're Christian. So they're living under Christians, they're living under Protestants, they're living under Baptists.
Those old Methodists.
Methodists. But they're also living under
their own rules.
Muslims. A lot of Jews are living under, because who's controlling the Holy Land? Muslims are ruling the Holy Land. So a lot of Jews are living under Muslims. You know, so you got them. There's some are living under Hindus. They're living under Buddhists.
But not as many, right? In the Far East.
In the Far East, no, not as many. But they're living under different religions, and so they've got to find a relationship with the different religions, and they're becoming more and more insular. They're pulling in within themselves. So that's something that's happening. How would the society under which they are living, how are they going to respond when they see the Jews pulling more and more inside themselves?
Be suspicious.
Okay, why would they start becoming suspicious?
Just going by the history of the 30s and everything, because they think that they're controlling certain parts.
Okay, they saw that. Well, even before the 30s, you know, we're talking about the 1300s, way back. Why would and Islam, in Muslim area, if you see a group of people that are pulling in closer and closer to themselves, in other words, they really would prefer not to have. Although Muslims become a little easier, because Muslims follow a lot of Jewish dietary laws.
Yes.
So the difference isn't huge. And the Muslims are radically monotheistic, and so are the Jews. So actually the relationship between Muslims and Jews are a whole lot better than between Christians and Jews. You know, because there's a lot of difference between Christians and Jews. Muslims and Jews, the difference isn't huge. And Muslims tended to be more content, less threatened by these little Jewish communities, because there weren't huge differences between Jews and Muslims. But Christians become very suspicious of Jews, as the Jews are pulling within themselves.
What are they trying to do to us? What are they going to...
Why don't they let Christians move into their little communities?
What are they hiding?
What are they hiding? Yeah.
They were just there for safety.
What are those Jews? Yeah, all right. You're being pretty naive. They aren't. You're being pretty naive. Yeah. Those Jews are getting together for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. And you know something? Even if they weren't, I don't like Jews anyway. Why don't I like Jews anyway?
They're different.
Well, there's a lot of different people.
Not as different.
But yeah, Jews are different, but there's another reason I don't like Jews.
Because they killed Jesus.
They killed Jesus. The Jews killed Jesus. Did the Romans kill him? Nope. Did the Muslims kill him?
No.
Nope. Who killed him? Jews. In fact, when Pilate, that poor Roman, wanted to turn him loose and said, why should I kill? Don't you want me to release your king? What did the Jews do? Crucify him, and even said, let his blood be on our heads and the heads of our children.
Yeah.
Are you?
That's crazy.
They're Christ killers, right? Those Jews are Christ killers. I don't like them. They're living in their little communities. They're not great anyway. They're worshiping different ways. They look different. You know.
They wear them funny hats.
They're funny. You know, weird.
Cake box hat.
Yeah, they wear cake box. Yeah, box hats. That looks silly.
Yeah.
You know.
They get them little curls down the side of their head.
And so maybe it's not a bad. And you know, they have all their philosophies. Because see, as a Christian, and aren't you can identify, really, as a Christian, if you want money from me, I'm a good Christian man, and if you need money, and you say, Brother Ed, go ahead and ask.
Brother Ed, I'm short on funds. Can you loan me some money?
Now, Brother Ed, my Christian brother needs funds. Brother Ed should do what? I should give him funds. Now, I'm not just going to give it. That would be...
No, you have to pay
So
it
I'm
back.
going to give you got to pay it back.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give it to you and you're going to pay it back, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to trust that you're going to pay it back.
With a
Okay.
contract.
Now, if that's the way we work, so I'm going to give you the funds and you're going to pay it back to me.
Correct.
When you're able, you know, you can't pay it back tomorrow, but when you're able, you'll pay it back to me. Now, would we call that but that has to do with usury, right? So if I say, I'm not going to do that, or I'll do that, but I'm going to charge you interest. See, Christians call that usury. And usury is a problem when it's two Christians dealing with one another. I mean, Christians shouldn't commit usury. That's a sin. You know, usury. So I'm not going to loan for interest. Now, if Art wants to build
temple.
Well, if he wants to buy a ship so he can trade it with the ease, he's going to need a lot of money, right? And I happen to have a lot of money. But I can't charge him interest. Am I going to give Art the money to buy his ship? Probably not. Why am I not going to do it?
Because you're not going to make anything on it?
I'm not going to make anything on it. I have just given him money, and if his ship sinks, what's all going to tell him?
Are you Jewish in this thing?
Well,
No, we're brothers. We're Christian brothers.
Oh, okay.
Now, but the Jewish people, they are not bound by Christian usury laws. So if I'm a Jewish man with a lot of money, and Art comes to me and he says, why does he want to buy a ship? Art wants to do what? Make money. But his goal is to make money. Does he think he can make money?
Yes.
Does he think he can make a lot of money?
Yeah.
You better believe it. So he's going to buy a ship. He thinks he can double the amount just by buying that ship. Right? So I say to Art, okay, I'll loan you the money to buy the ship, but you've got to give me 20% interest when you get back. Now Art says what? Art says, okay, because he's going to double his money.
Right.
He's going to pay a portion to me. If he doesn't get my money, he doesn't get his ship. He doesn't get his ship, he doesn't double his money.
Right.
So he is willing to pay me what?
Interest.
Interest. And I, as a lender, will do what? Lend it to him. But I've got another friend, his name is Saul, right here. And he started his own business because we're a little nervous. Because see, the trouble is, if you don't pay me, I will kill you. Because I can hire people that will hunt you down like the dog you are and kill you. Okay? And you say, ooh, that's dangerous. And I say, don't worry, Art. My buddy Saul is willing to sell you a little bit of
Money.
insurance.
insurance.
Here we
So
go.
you pay Saul a little bit of money, and Saul says, if you come back, oh, you're just paying me a little bit of money. You come back, everything is fine. You know, we're fine. I'm not going to give it back to you.
Okay.
You're paying insurance. But if your ship goes down, sinks, I will pay what you owe to my friend. Right. You bought a little bit of insurance.
Yeah, but-
Now, can Saul be a Christian? Heck no. He can't do that. That's usury. He can't charge you for that.
No.
Okay, so what ends up happening in these little Jewish
Yeah,
communities?
but you left off one step.
What's that?
Before he give him the money, charge him 20%. He wants collateral.
Absolutely.
On that.
You know,
On that.
absolutely. So we're talking about
So
developing
you
a
got-
financial system.
So you not only got the insurance, but you got collateral. So
Absolutely.
no matter how
That-
they make out, or whatever happens, they're gonna make out.
But the Pope
But isn't-
says usury is wrong between Christians, but the Pope has no influence
On the Jews.
over Jews. So what ends up happening?
Christians are dumb.
Christians are spiritual. We're close to God. What's happening?
Jews goes in the bank.
The Jews are forming banks to loan to Christians because Christians want to buy ships to trade. Christian kings and dukes need money to do things like what?
Cathedrals. They got to
Build cathedrals.
Houses.
If I want to build a big cathedral, I either have to sell indulgences or borrow money from Jews.
That's right.
You know, if I'm going to build a cathedral,
Yeah.
you know, so I got to do it. What else are Christian kings and dukes and princes? Why do they need money?
Fight read.
If I'm going to fight a war, wars are not cheap. I have to borrow money from the banker. And the banker is a Rothschild. You know, he is Jewish. You know, and he's bought because he can lend money to Christians. Now, usury eventually becomes when Protestant Roman Catholics are always going to be nervous about usury. You know, but when Protestants break away, Protestants, and that's why being a Protestant is great, Protestants say, woo, who cares? And that's why the Dutch start becoming the bankers, and the English become the bankers of Europe, because they're Protestant. You don't have big banking houses that are controlled by Roman Catholics in Italy. Though Italian banks are controlled by Jews, you know. But you do have Protestant banks.
Don't you have a big bank in the Vatican? Supposedly one of the richest in the world.
Well, it becomes a big source of money.
Yes.
But they aren't loaning it out for interest. They're investing it.
Yes.
But you end up with Protestants. We're talking about getting an 800-year. We're 800 years behind. So those banks are already developed. So all of a sudden we've got this economic system. Now the fact that when the Ebenezer Scrooge, the Ebenezer Scrooge is Jewish in a lot of places, is the one collecting your money. How do nice Christians feel about the Jews that are collecting the money?
Not very well.
Yeah, they're the ones that aren't real happy. So how do they feel about Jews? Not real good, even though most Jews aren't bankers. Most Jews are what? Shopkeepers, farmers, regular people, struggling to find a living, you know. But all Jews are, they're Christ killers. They're hiding something, right? They're hiding something, and they control
Money.
the money. They control the money. And all of a sudden, when you talk about 500, 600, 700, 800, 1,000 years of believing that, all of a sudden those ideas become law. Yeah, become entrenched in the science.
Yeah, they become beliefs.
Yeah, and that's why in Roman Catholic areas in Europe, far worse, and Orthodox areas of Europe, the treatment of Jews becomes far worse than the Protestant parts. Because the Protestants, they're loaning money anyway. So you have a looser connection, you know, with this financial. The Jews control the finances. You know, in France, in Italy, in Spain. Yeah, that's what they're thinking.
Italy.
In Germany, in the Netherlands, there are a lot of Protestant bankers out there. In England, so it's a little, the anti-Semitism becomes less entrenched than it will be in, that's why Germany becomes such a shocker. Because of all the places in Europe where you'd have a Holocaust, Germany is the absolute least likely place for it to happen. France, Russia, oh yeah, programs were all the time in Russia, moving Jews around. Germany, really a surprise, because the Germans weren't historically anti-Semitic.
Would that be a reason why it took so long for the Allies to believe?
I think it was really a struggle. One of the things, though, that you almost have to file in the back of your head is that Hitler was from Austria, and his family was Roman Catholic. Now he wasn't. Who knows what he was? But his background was this Roman Catholic Austrian that would have had far harsher views of Jews, just by their nature, than Protestants, than the Germans in Prussia.
But he did have some connection with a Jew in his family. There was family.
Well, good gracious. You know, there's a wonderful movie, and if you have never seen it, watch it. Watch it. Find some way to watch it. Rent it, buy it. It is one of the, I'd say, top 10 best movies ever.
Gone with the Wind.
Well, I put Gone with the Wind up there, but this I put even better than Gone. 1940, The Great Dictator. The Great Dictator with Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin, The Great Dictator. Well, you know, Adolf Hitler looks amazingly like Charlie Chaplin. You know, with his little mustache. Charlie Chaplin, The Great Dictator, and wonderful. Adenoid Hinkle is the dictator's name.
But he only grew that mustache for the movie.
What? Charlie Chaplin?
Yeah, he didn't have mustache.
Charlie Chaplin had a fake. He wore a fake mustache. But Charlie Chaplin, great dictator, in part of the movie, he's dealing with his people, this government that he has. But he needs money. He wants to take Austria, but they call it Austerlitz. He wants to take, which the Germans do in 1938, but he needs money to do it, to get his army in case he has to go to war. He needs money. And so he decides to be nicer to the Jews so that they can loan him money so he can build out his army.
But he didn't like the Jews.
So he's nice to the Jews until the Jews bankers turn him down, and then he turns back. So, Germany was an odd place for anti-Semitism. It was a really strange place. But what we end up with is the Jews becoming more and more insular. You have facing persecution, particularly in the Christian, not in the Muslim East. We think this Muslim Jewish, hostility goes back forever. The Muslims were far more open to the Jews than Christians ever were. The problem becomes Israel becomes the problem with Muslims and Jews. Okay, so we have a whole series of persecutions. So you asked about how do the Jews see themselves as a result of the Holocaust. One of the interesting things when you read Jewish writings, the Holocaust, and we're going to break like now, and we'll look at Jewish beliefs next week. When you look at the Holocaust, the Jews are going to see the Holocaust as one of those defining moments in Jewish history. Right along with the giving of the law, right along with the anointing of David, right along with the dedication of the temple, the Holocaust will become something the Jews see as a spiritual defining moment.
Yeah, I think I read something in 1967 during the First War that some Jewish writer, somebody said the philosophy was never again. When Egypt, when they were having a conflict, when the Jews, when Israel had the initial strike,
they will
never again.
They will do something really interesting theologically with the Holocaust, because when you talk about the exile, as they write and reflect on the exile, and even the Roman destruction of the temple, they're going to attribute it to the exile to Jewish sin. Jews have sinned, therefore God has punished them for turning away from God. It's not. Why are they in exile? God. Why are they in exile? God. The Romans, when they come, remember the only Jews left after the Romans destroy the temple are the Pharisees. And the Pharisees are focused on law. They don't focus like the Sadducees on temple. They focus on law. So the Pharisees will say, see, why was the temple destroyed? God, we had drifted away from what should be the focus of our heritage, which is law, by going into temple worship, by proselytizing, by growing. That's wrong. We should be pulling within. So God is reminding us that that's not what we should be doing. So it's consistent with what they had said before. Even the pogroms and the ghettos. And the ghetto.
Is that what that is?
We're talking. Well, this is a program where, sometimes the Jews are just told, leave.
Are those bodies? Are they bodies or what?
What in here? Oh yeah, Christians are just throwing Jews out of a part of the city. They've done that for 1,000 years. Christians have moved Jews around.
That's why we came to America.
Well, not unlike. Well, it's not unlike how we dealt with Native Americans. When they find out something there that they want, the Jews are going to have to move because we want it. So that's what they did. The Russians did programs, movements all the time. Fiddle on the Roof. The whole thing in Fiddle on the Roof is that. All of a sudden the Russian government says, you can't be here anymore, you gotta go. And the Jews gotta go. They get up and leave. So that's pretty characteristic. The ghetto in Europe is one that the Christians are pleased with because you can wall them off. They're not going to be an influence in society. You can control what they can do. The Jews aren't horribly upset because this also protects their culture. So the ghetto protects they're not worried about the infiltration of Christian thought. So it's kind of a mutually supportive thing.
And the other one is body parts.
And this is after these are Jews.
They're body parts.
Yeah, what they found in the concentration camp.
Now, Steve,
What I was going to say is there's a consistency as how Jews interpreted the history. the Holocaust, and this is why it's one of those seminal events for Jews, is they're not going to interpret the Holocaust as the Jews have drifted away from God, and God is punishing them.
And
Do
they think that now? Do they think, like the wars they've had and everything, do they think that
No.
is from God?
No. What they're going to look at the
they're-
Holocaust, and they're going to say, they're going to see it as the reality of evil in the world. Not the reality of God. And the evil is not greater than God, because it never is. But that you got to be aware that evil is constant in this world.
Kind of turn.
It becomes a nuance in their theology. Therefore, human beings, we have a responsibility. God doesn't mean that God has abandoned us. It means that though human beings have to be responsible for their actions. And that's why they can say, human beings can prevent this from happening.
Jewish people
It's not a matter of just, exactly.
And because of this, are the Jewish people getting receiving more respect?
Well,
No.
They're beating everybody. They're beating the crap out of anybody.
Yeah. Okay, and finally we got modern Judaism. This is a Jewish temple. What does that look like to you?
Catholic Church.
Looks like a Catholic church. Because in Western Europe, and these are good Jews going to worship.
They look Catholic.
They look Catholic, they look Protestant,
Well,
they look European.
You have different Jews, so you have the Orthodox and
Sure.
you have non-Orthodox.
This is in Frankfurt, Germany. You know it's a synagogue because you got the Star of David and the tablets on the top of the roof. But this is these Jews would see themselves as Germans, and this is a Reformed temple was a Reformed temple in Frankfurt, Germany. Judaism, well, and even in America, Judaism. The Presbyterians, the Reformed Christians, weren't very open to Jews, but there were other people like Roger Williams in Rhode Island that were. And the Quakers were really open to Jews. The first synagogue is going to be in Philadelphia. So this becomes how Judaism is developing, becomes more assimilated into culture. These people are not going to the ghetto. They're going back to their homes and their apartments. What's happening here?
It looks like the Jewish...
That's a synagogue.
Whatever they
Yeah.
call it.
Well,
No.
what is this?
Star of David's up there.
Star of David. But, this is a little different Star of David. What is that? What is Star of David? No question. What are those? And does anybody know who he is? Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion. This is flag of Israel.
Oh, Israel.
This is the flag of Israel.
Yeah.
So the formation of the state of Israel ends up becoming an important event in Jewish history. Although
Who's the picture?
of this, I don't know. I don't know who that
That
is.
looks like my uncle.
It's Art's uncle. This is a picture of Art's
Does
uncle
it look like your phone?
right here. It looks a little like my father if he grew a beard.
Yeah.
Well, what do they call? What do they call their Senate? It has some.
Knesset.
Well, this is what
Knesset. This is the formation of the state of Israel. Really important that the state of Israel is not a religious state. A lot of Christians view the state of Israel as the recreation of ancient Israel. Ben-Gurion did not see the state of Israel as a recreation of biblical Israel. That's why citizens of Israel are not called Israelites. They're called Israelis, because they are not Israelites. They are Israelis. This is a secular state. This isn't a religious state. Now, this is formed in 47. Now, when you're talking about 70 years later, more and more Jews are seeing it as a religious state. A lot of Protestant Christians are seeing this as a religious state, which is very interesting, because at one time Protestants, evangelical Protestants would not have been open to Jews, but they seem to be really open to the
Are we
state.
getting lesser involved with dislike for each other in a world now?
What do you think?
I
You think we're more open to one another in the world now?
I think so, except for that gizmo that got president.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I think there's some signs that we are. I think there are some signs that we aren't. And maybe that's the way it always is. You know,
Probably.
it kind of shifts from one to another.
it is interesting.
But I don't, you know, I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
Well, you're wiser than I. That's why I thought maybe you
Oh.
looked at it longer.
Well, I'm not wiser than you are.
Oh,
Who
you-
is wiser
indeed.
than you?
You.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Any questions? We'll look at religious Jewish beliefs next time. Let's have a word of prayer. Lord God, thank you for calling us here and help us to get home quickly. Amen.
You must be